Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shanti Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shanti Shantireva Shanti Shantirme Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvasadbuddhimapnotu, sarvasarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Shanti 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 Harihi Om. Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amrutam Gamaya Aviravir Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Te Namam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our topic today is the tree without a future. Now, we do know that the trees do seem to have a bleak future because of deforestation in many parts of the world, and hence the concerns, the harm it's doing to ecology. Khalil Gibran, the celebrated author of that classic, The Prophet, he writes, "Trees are poems that earth writes upon the sky. We fell them down and turned them into paper that we may record our emptiness." So the trees do have a very, very bleak future. But today, I would like to spend the next few minutes reflecting on a different kind of tree. The tree in Sanskrit, it's called Ashwatha. The Sanskrit term, it comes from Shwa. The word Shwa in Sanskrit means tomorrow. And Tha or Stha means to be or to be standing. And the prefix A always, usually, adds the connotation of the negative. So, Swastha is healthy, Aswastha is unhealthy. In the same way, Shwatha and Ashwatha means that which will not be standing tomorrow, that which won't be here tomorrow. And that's why I call it the tree without a future. Now, the Ashwatha tree occurs again and again in Indian mythology. It is sometimes called the people tree, and then it's also called the Bodhi tree, because it was under the same tree that the Buddha acquired enlightenment. And so what gets often referred to as the Bodhi tree, you'll find a descendant of that tree in Bodh Gaya today in India, of the same tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment. So the Bodhi, the people, the Ashwatha, people, it's not the English people, they all refer to the same tree. Now, the tree symbology, we know, is been invoked by writers, by poets, and it's prevalent extensively in religious literature as well. We know, of course, the festival we have on the first of every year, the wish-fulfilling tree, often called the Kalpataru or Kalpavriksha, supposed to be a mythical tree in heaven, standing under which all our wishes will be fulfilled. We know also about the trees in the Garden of Eden, especially the tree of life, or which also sometimes gets called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, or sometimes even the forbidden tree. So the tree occurs again and again in various contexts in literature. Sri Ramakrishna's teachings also, he refers to this Ashwatha tree. And he employs this symbology to often in the context of egoism. How oftentimes in religion we see that it's the ego, the sense of I, which separates me from the rest of the world. And all of our interactions, all of our life is really this I dealing with the world, which is the not I. And in this kind of a relationship between the I and the world can take any number of forms. So in fact, our entire life can be seen as a kind of an interaction between the I, the ego, and all of this which is not me. And so it is in that context that Sri Ramakrishna uses the symbol of the Ashwatha tree. Now, and what he says is this, that as spiritual seekers, no matter how often we make an attempt to minimize our egoism and kind of get rid of it, we find that as soon as we stop being alert, suddenly the ego has come up again. It just seems so persistent. And that's why Ramakrishna said, it is very hard to get rid of egoism. You may cut down an Ashwatha tree, but the next day a sprout will spring up. Along, as the roots remain, the trees will grow again and again. So as long as the roots are intact, the tree will not stop growing. And so it is this Ashwatha tree, the tree without a future, a tree which won't be there tomorrow. But as they also say, tomorrow never comes. So somehow the tree seems to be persisting, but when it is said it won't be there tomorrow means it's not eternal, that it can stop, its existence can end. But it won't end, as the example that Ramakrishna gave, unless and until it is uprooted totally. We know that oftentimes you just cut the branches of a tree, or just even cut the stump. Sometimes the tree will again regenerate and come up again. It's only when you remove the tree from its roots that it won't come up again. So this Ashwatha tree comes again and again in Vedantic literature as well. And the two most familiar examples of that are the reference that comes in the Gita, in the 15th chapter of the Gita, the opening verses of those chapters, and a verse that occurs in the Upanishad called the Katha Upanishad. And the two verses are pretty much identical in most ways. We will see that those who have studied the Upanishads find that several verses in the Upanishad, in the Gita, are an echo with very slight modification from what occurs in the Upanishad. And that's not surprising, because the Gita is historically much later book than the Upanishads, and it is considered as an abridged summary of the Upanishadic message. So the Upanishadic literature is vast, the Vedas are vaster still, and all of this gets kind of condensed in this book, the Gita, and therefore it's not surprising that the Gita quotes in several places the verses that occur in the Upanishads. So these are the first two verses in the 15th chapter of the Gita. I'll read the Sanskrit first. Urdhvamulam adhashakham ashwatham prahuravyayam chandamsi yasya parnani yastam veda savedavit adhaschordhvam prasritastasya shakha guna pravrittha vishaya pravalaha adhaschamulanyanu karmanubandhini manushya-loke. These are the first two verses. And what they mean is this. They speak of an eternal Ashwatha tree with its roots above and branches below, whose leaves are the Vedas. He who knows this understands the Vedas truly. Below and above spread its branches, nourished by the gunas. Sense objects are its buds, its roots which lead to action, stretch below in the human world. So this is an unusual tree, as you can see. First of all, it's upside down. The trees that we are familiar with have the roots down and the branches above. Now this tree is upside down, its roots are above, and the branches come. And we can understand why the tree has to be upside down, because in the Vedantic metaphysic, if everything has descended from the one, that the many come from the one, then the root, the seed, that's one, and from then all this tree branches outward. So that's why it's roots above and branches below. Now the leaves of this tree are identified with the scriptures, with the Vedas. And so understanding what this tree stands for, understanding the imagery of the upside down tree would give us a correct understanding of what the message that the Vedas are trying to convey here. And the next verse says, below and above spread its branches, nourished by the gunas. So what is it that provides the nourishment for this tree? Now, gunas are the attributes of nature. That is what makes nature dynamic. Every activity, physical, mental, is nourished by these gunas. The sense objects, all the objects, all the material objects that we sense in the world are the buds on this tree, and the roots. So this people tree or this Ashwatha tree has secondary roots. So the primary root, which goes deep down into the earth, that's upward. The secondary roots actually hang from the tree, and so these are the roots from which action or karma, all the activity that we see in the world, emerges. Now we find the same words, similar words in the Katha Upanishad, and I will now recite that, and we can see then how the commentators have tried to describe, explain what these verses mean. So the Katha Upanishad version goes like this: Urdhvamulo avakshakha esho shvattha sanatanaha tadeva shukram tad brahma tadevamritamuchyate tasmin loka shrita sarve tadunatyeti kaschana etadvaitat. So this is what the Upanishadic portion said. This is that eternal Ashwatha tree with its roots above and branches below, exactly identical with the Gita. That root indeed is called the shining one. So the root, the shining one, the effulgent one, that is the one divine being, Brahman. The supreme being from which everything emerges is that root which is upward. That root indeed is called the bright, that is Brahman, and that alone is the immortal. In other words, that alone stays. Everything else is mortal. The branches can be cut down, the leaves will fall off, the tree will ultimately die. But the source from which all of this emerged, that will never go. In that all worlds are contained and none can pass beyond. So everything that we experience in the world, in the inner world and the outer world, is a part of this tree. And this verily is that. Now, Shankaracharya, when he wrote a commentary on this verse, he kind of fleshes out the details. Oftentimes, the original text will give the imagery in a very condensed form. And the great mystics who then wrote commentaries on it were able to see the deeper layers of meanings involved. They then try to describe it. So this is what Shankara said. So he said, this tree has no real substance, like the stem of a plantain tree. Of course, in New England area, we don't get to see these banana trees or plantain trees, but if ever you go to maybe Florida or somewhere in a little warmer climate, when you see the banana tree, which seems to have a pretty strong stem, but they are kind of layers, and you kind of keep on peeling the layers, ultimately find it doesn't have any substance in it. And that's why these plantain trees they look big, but they're pretty light. So you can just you just take one simple little axe or something, it doesn't have to be a very heavy axe, and give one whack and it just falls down. So it has an appearance of a big tree, but it's still very fragile because there is no substance. And then Shankara describes each of the parts of that tree. The roots, the primary root of the tree is Brahman, the divine, God. Now, what is it that produces the tree? What is the seed from which everything comes? And the seed is ignorance. And again, this is something that we are already familiar with. Why is the seed of creation ignorance, according to Vedanta? And the reason is this: how can the many emerge from the one? If one is all that exists, then, and if that's the truth, then the many can never come from the one. So the diversity can never come from unity, because unity is the truth. The only way diversity can come from unity is if somehow that which is one forgets that I am one, I am alone. And the only way we can forget we are alone is when we fall asleep. It's like sometime you may be alone at home. As long as you are awake, you know you are alone. But then you just lie down in your bed, you switch off the light, and until you fall asleep, you still know, oh, I'm just alone. And then suddenly you fall asleep. And when you fall asleep, and then you start dreaming, you are no longer alone. Suddenly, you are in the midst of a huge world. There are lots of animals, birds, friends, all of these things you meet in your dream world, and you don't even know. You completely forget that you are lying in your bed with your lights off and you are just sleeping. You forget that. And because you forget that you are alone, you suddenly find yourself with this dream world which you have created. So in order for the dream world to be possible, it was necessary for me to forget myself. It was necessary for me to not remember who I am and where I am. That's why the seed for this multiplicity, the diversity to emerge, has to be ignorance, has to be a kind of self-forgetfulness. So this infinite being who alone existed and who alone exists, somehow, and we say somehow because there is no rational explanation of why and how, or if it even happened. And that's why we say somehow this one being fell asleep and then began dreaming this. And that's why the seed of this whole, which produces this great tree, is ignorance. And then once that ignorance occurs, the basic ignorance occurs, once I forget that I'm the only being, forgetfulness will always then, let's see how that forgetfulness can manifest. If I forget that I'm infinite, I will start thinking of myself as finite. If I don't know that I'm immortal, if I forget that I'm immortal, I will start seeing myself as mortal. So, how I see myself now is in most respects completely opposite of who I really am, because I've forgotten who I really am. And that's why our present human identity has become possible only because I have forgotten my divine identity. But not totally. If we had totally forgotten it, then we would have no way of even imagining it. But the fact that we still occasionally have glimpses, so to speak, that's why sometimes people speak about glimpses of immortality. There is something occasionally, either in our imagination or sometime through our experience, we somehow know that our life means more than what we are now. That there is something deeper, something more real. I may not have sensed it yet, I may not have experienced it yet, but there are occasions in our lives when somehow we get that glimpse, which is how really spiritual life starts. Without that kind of a
however dim a glimpse, without, however, this kind of a feeling that what I'm experiencing now cannot be the complete story. There are some pieces missing. You know the pieces are missing, you don't know yet where those pieces are and what those pieces are. And that's why a spiritual seeker, what a spiritual seeker is seeking are those missing pieces of the puzzle. And so the first sprout, as soon as I become a small little being, a mortal human being, I then become a creator in my own right. First of all, every night I create a dream. Because I have become small myself, I see other small beings, but I also see beings who are bigger than me, larger than me. So in some ways, the creator God becomes possible after the creature becomes aware of his or her creature identity. So there would not be a creator unless there was creation. As sometimes we say, parents, if you have a first child, until that child was born, you were not parents. So just as from a parent's perspective, a child is born, from the perspective of that first child, the parents are born as well. So God was not a creator until there was creation. And so we could say, well, the first creature was created by God, but at that very moment, a creator God also came into being. And that infinite being who is capable of knowing, who is capable of creating, in Sanskrit sometimes it's called Hiranyagarbha. Literally translated, that would mean the golden womb, but sometimes it's called what we normally refer to as the personal God. So God as the creator, God as one who loves us, who takes care of us, becomes possible only when there is someone who needs that care, who needs that love. So the creator God is a part of this already divided world. The trunk of this tree, Shankara says in his commentary, are all the subtle bodies of all the living beings we see. The nourishment, what provides nourishment to this tree? What is it that makes the tree grow? And what makes the tree grow are the desires in the hearts of all creatures. Because we know it's desire that leads to action. Put it this way. In Sanskrit, they have this chain reaction. Avidya, which means ignorance, kama, which means desire, and karma, which means activity. Again, to go back to that, what I mentioned earlier, when I alone exist, when nothing exists apart from me, I don't have any desire. Because in order for a desire to be present, there has to be something apart from me. I mean, there has to be something to be desired in order for the desire to even arise. So when there is just oneness, there is no desire, there is no lack of desire, well, there is no desire at all. As soon as I become small and I discover that there are things apart from me, then I react to them. And if those things are pleasant, I want them. If those things are unpleasant, I want to run away from them. Either way, there is a desire to want something or a desire not to want something, either way. So a desire is a natural outcome of making ourselves smaller. You see, it's like this. In deep sleep, when we are not even dreaming, we don't have any desires because there is nothing apart from me in deep sleep. But in dream and in the waking world, we find many entities, living and non-living, apart from me. And therefore, every reaction I have to things apart from me, in terms of either wanting them or not wanting them, that's just a result of desire. And that's what keeps the activity going, because no sooner I want to do something, I find ways to do it. and finding ways to do it leads to action. So, ignorance, desire, activity. And it is this activity which then spreads out this tree. So, the nourishment for this tree is provided by desire. The sprouts, the buds, the tender buds, as the Gita verse referred to earlier, the objects are the senses, leaves are the books or scriptures, flowers of this tree are the deeds, are the karma, are the action that we do. And the fruits of the tree are the results of the action. So flowers are karma, fruits are the karma phala. And fruits we know. Sometimes fruits can be sweet and sometimes fruits can be bitter. And every one of us, is a bird on this tree of life. Lots of branches, and the more you study science, the more you know how vast the tree is. Well, the more you discover, there are so many galaxies and so many this. Well, you see, the branches of this tree are spreading, not limited only to our solar system. It can go not limited to only the galaxy we are in. It can spread everywhere. So the greater the knowledge of the material world we have, the more we know how vast this tree is. And all of us are birds on this tree. And as birds, what do the birds do? Birds need to eat in order to survive. And then we keep on eating the fruits of the tree. And as I said, the fruits are sometimes bitter and sometimes sweet. So the experience of joy and sorrow that we have in life are the fruits that we keep on eating as birds on this tree. And the different nests on this tree, Shankaracharya points out in his commentary, are the different planes of existence. So maybe on the same vast tree, there may be some very kind of a comfortable nest and surrounded by maybe a lot of sweet fruits. And we occasionally go and stay in that nest for a while and say, oh, this is heaven. And there may be some really tiny, uncomfortable nests on this tree, surrounded by very bitter fruits. We say, well, that's hell. So whether we are talking about heavens or hells or going to this place or that place, we are still on the tree. So no matter, so the tree is not limited only to this material world that we see. All of these other worlds, if you like, that are described in the texts, call them heaven or hell, and in old Sanskrit texts we hear the different lokas. They call it Brahma Loka, Chandra Loka, Surya Loka, and any of these celestial planes, which material sciences don't even speak about them. But whether the subtler worlds or the material worlds, all of them are still on this tree. And that's why the popular way in which we understand heavens and hells are rejected as the ultimate goal in Vedanta, because they say, well, you're still on the tree. Sometimes it's a comfortable nest or not a comfortable nest, but we are still tied to that tree. And one other way, they said the chirping sound of the birds are all actions. So the birds just can't stop chirping. Have you ever seen a bird which is completely, the bird will be quiet only when the bird is dead. So and that's why we can never stop working. We can never stop chirping. And as sometimes we have those of us who come for the Gita class on Wednesdays, we have heard this often, that we don't have choice. We don't have a choice not to do any activity. Work is inbuilt into who we are right now. And by work, it's not simply the work that we do to earn your livelihood. Any kind of an activity, we cannot live without activity. Even if you sit physically still in one place, your mind is still jumping about. And so our choice is not between doing work and not doing work. Our choice is between if I have to do work anyway, let me do what is right. Let me do what is good. Because the chances are, if I don't do what is right, if I don't do what is good, I'll very likely be doing what is not good or what is not right. So the only way to stop doing what is not right, to stop doing what is not good, is to keep on doing what's good. It's a little bit like sometimes in India, as I was growing up, you've seen these bullock carts. Sometimes no matter how tired the bullocks may be, they have to keep on moving, because the moment they stop, they have the stick behind, and they just kind of get beaten. So for them, the choice is really not between stopping and not stopping, because the choice is either stop and get beaten or keep on walking. So that's our situation. The choice is between not working and not working. The choice is between doing what is right and good and experiencing contentment and joy in life, or doing what is not right and what is not good and experiencing pain in life. But there is one other choice that we have, and that is, we don't have to be on the tree all the time. What if the birds suddenly know that you're not really tied to that tree? There is a Swami Vivekananda's poem, The Song of the Sannyasin. There is this line which says that, "Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on." So the imagery is very clear that, let's say we are getting dragged by, in olden days they used to do that, kind of a severe form of punishment. Someone would just tie the person hands and kind of drag them, when the tormentor maybe is sitting on a horseback and these other prisoners are being just dragged down. It's kind of extremely painful. Now, what if the one who is being dragged discovers, my hands are not really tied. I'm holding on to the rope that's dragging me, and all that I need to do is just let go, and I'm free. So first of all, I need the knowledge that I'm really not tied to that, and I must have the courage to let go. Now, for many people, they don't even know that they are not really tied to that rope. They don't even know that as birds, they are not tied to the tree. They can fly away, but they don't. But secondly, we also need, even when we have the knowledge that we are not tied to the tree, we need the courage to know that I can be free and I can take care of myself even when I'm not on the tree. Sometime you will see that, the Ringling brothers, they just closed that circle after, I think, 146 years of existence. And there's much is said and written on that subject about the good side and the bad side of these taming of the wild animals. But sometimes you may have also heard this, and there's a lot of truth in it, that when we domesticate these wild creatures, over time they lose their capacity to take care of themselves. Sometimes these kind of domesticated creatures, then you go and leave them out in the wild, they won't be able to survive. And some of you may have seen even some birds kept in cages, and they say they have been there for a long time. And sometimes you can open the door, and first of all, they may not have the courage to come out of the cage. And I have seen sometimes the birds come out of the cage, maybe even kind of fly to a nearby tree, and maybe after a few minutes, come back again and enter the cage. They could be free, but somehow they have lost that confidence that I can take care of myself. Well, here I'm just getting food. What if I go out and I don't get food? And so these birds on this tree that we are speaking about are tasting these sweet and bitter fruits, but don't have the courage to fly away. And that's why we have this other imagery of the birds then and the tree in the Upanishad, which speaks about this one bird who was tasting this sweet and bitter fruit. And that bird is any one of us. And as this bird is tasting, the sweet and bitter fruits, suddenly happens to look up and then discover a new bird up above, pretty much to the tip of the tree. And that bird is very unusual. The bird is shining. It's a kind of an aura of peace and contentment and light around that bird. And so this bird who is eating these fruits when on a lower branch of the tree said, "Mom, who is that bird? I've never really seen that bird any time." And said, "Let me go closer and take a look." And so this bird kind of hops one branch up. But as soon as this bird hops this one branch above, it suddenly discovers another one fruit nearby. And then it says, "Okay, let me just taste this fruit and then go upwards." And then that fruit is maybe sweet. And so this bird says, "This is delicious, then let me try one more." Sometime you will see, if you are doing some Google search and you're looking for some reference, and you go to some site and then you find something more interesting, something that you were not really looking for, and then you kept look at that and then click some other link, another link, you have completely gone astray. You have not even gone to what you are looking for. You're just completely taken away. Exactly in the same way, this bird, which really wanted to go to that upper bird, suddenly finds some fruits nearby and starts eating those fruits. And then suddenly kind of bites on something extremely bitter fruit. And he says, "Oh my God, this is terrible." And then he suddenly remembers, "But I didn't really come to eat the fruit. I wanted to go to that bird above." And it looks up again finds the bird, hops one branch up, again gets distracted. And so the story goes on to say, gradually, as it comes closer and closer to that upper bird, it suddenly discovers that light and that aura of that upper bird is kind of engulfing this lower bird. And then suddenly, it discovers that there is really no other bird. It looks at itself, the bird looks at itself and finds that it itself is that shining bird, that there were really no two birds to begin with. And it was right there on top. It could fly away all by itself. It had all the strength, all the wisdom, all the courage to do so. It was not dependent on anybody. So that's where we are. So the world that we live in, all the things that we are busy ourselves with, so we are the birds in this huge, huge tree. It's not infinite. Only Brahman, only God is infinite. The tree is still finite. But with our finite intelligence and understanding, even the material extent of the tree is mind-boggling. I mean, think about it. Even we can hear about these galaxies, some of them several million light years away. I mean, even to think about it is like, even for the light from those galaxies to reach here would take millions of years. So it's mind-boggling. We just can't grasp it, even the material extent of it. So that's where we are. Little birds, think about how little we are. Think about just the extent. You just go to visit a planetarium now and then, just to see how vast this world is in which we live, how vast this universe is in which we live. And then how small little, it's worse than not even tiny insects compared to the vastness of the universe. And in these tiny little creatures that we are, and we have our own bloated egos and we have our own stories, sometimes I think we think too much of ourselves. It'll be it'll make us a little bit humble to know how big the universe is, even materially, and how small we are materially. But then we look inside our heart. And then we discover that within the heart, there's another one whole huge universe. A big universe, even bigger than the world that is outside. And the more we look inside, then we discover we are not as small as we think we are. It's then we discover that we are not really tied to this tree. We can fly away anytime we want. But the problem is, Think about it this way. What if okay, look at it this way. Say night you go to sleep and you start dreaming. And then in the dream world, of course, you meet your friends, you have, you are having fun there, and you have developed relationships, you have so many people, so many things, so many places you look upon as your very own. Now, what if someone were to tell you in your dream, hey, this is only a dream, wake up? And maybe you kind of feel that that could be true, but still you may not want to wake up, because you might think, oh my God, if I wake up, all these things which are my own will go away. Let's say if you, in your dream, you have won a lottery, you have suddenly earned millions, and then someone says, why don't you wake up? You say, no, let me enjoy this, all of this that I have. So even when I know that it's possible for me to wake up and go out of it, I may not want to do so. And it's not only when you won a lottery. It's possible that it may be an extremely painful dream, and I still may not want to wake up, because there is such a thing as a fear of the unknown. So sometimes our present painful existence might be more assuring than walking into this total unknown about which we know nothing. And there is always this doubts in the mind. Well, yes, my life presently is not too satisfactory, but this is the only thing I know. How can I walk into an unknown and suddenly discover it may be in a much worse place? What don't we say, like from frying pan into fire? And so even if I may not be completely happy with the way things are, I might still hesitate to go someplace else about which I know nothing. That's where we need faith, because here is someone who comes and says, come on, I'll take you to a place which is much better. And then there's always kind of a suspicion or doubt. It's like, how do I know you're telling me the truth? How can I? So letting go of the known and to step into the unknown, that leap of faith become possible on depending on how strong the faith is. And that is what the Upanishads call as Shraddha. Spiritual seeking will not become real unless and until, first of all, you know that there is a spirit to be sought. Because as spiritual seekers in the beginning, all that we have is faith with us. We have not experienced God. We have books and mystics and teachers and prophets telling us about these things. None of us has experienced it. And yet, in order for us to invest our time and energy into it, we need to have some basic faith that it could be true. And then we walk into it. And then, of course, the good news is that faith will eventually mature into experience. Sometimes it can go through the intermediate step of intellectual conviction. It doesn't have to be there all the time, but sometimes faith matures through a conviction, which is still intellectual. It's not an experience. But then that experience, that conviction then gives us that stability, that confidence to continue the practice, which then matures into experience. And once you have that experience, you don't need faith anymore. So faith is really needed unless and until we had that experience first. Now that is the kind of faith these birds on the tree need. That is the kind of faith we know, because once the birds know that I can be free, then it becomes possible. And that's described in the words 3 and 4 of the Gita. I'll just read them quickly before concluding. Na rupamasyeha tathopalabhyate nanto na chadir na cha sampratishtha
Ashvatthaменam suvirudhamulam asanga shastrena dridhena chitva tataf padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyah tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yata pravrittif prasrita purani. So the form of the tree is not here perceived, neither its end, nor its origin, nor its existence. The more we try to grasp the extent of this tree, we will never be able to do it. Because we have made ourselves so small, and the tree has become so big, and the only equipment we have to gauge the extent of the tree is our own intellect. And our intellect, no matter how great we might think it is, it's still a very limited entity. And therefore, with our present limitations of the mind and the intellect, we cannot even gauge the extent, the material extent of the universe. So the only way for us to do is to cut this tree from its root. And that's what he said. Having cut asunder this firm-rooted Ashwattha tree with the strong axe of detachment, all that we need to know is that we are not tied to the tree. I have the freedom to fly away whenever I want. My wings are strong enough for me to fly away. I am not dependent on the fruits of this tree. I am self-sufficient. I am complete. You see, all desire springs from a sense of incompleteness. The moment I feel this is what I lack, and without this I will never be full, you want it. But when you feel you are completely content, you don't want anything. Just think about it. After a heavy meal, a delicious heavy meal, for some time you don't want anything. Well, you feel complete. You don't want anything. Then when you feel hungry again, well, you want food. So a sense of incompleteness is necessary for desire. And so using this strong acts of detachment really means affirming that I don't depend on anything. I'm a complete being. And that the last verse says, then that goal is to be sought for, going where the wise do not return again. So to return again is to kind of get mixed up in this tree politics and not be free. So if you fly away, you're free from all the hazards that living in this cosmic tree brings about. And then the verse ends by saying, I seek refuge in that primordial being from whom streams forth eternal activity. And this is very important. We began by speaking about, Sri Ramakrishna speaking about the egoism, which is so difficult to uproot. And the egoism is what gives us the sense of agency. It's that egoism which makes me feel I'm the one who is doing things. I am thinking, I am doing. And what this verse points out is all activity, all kinds of thinking and doing really comes from God. So if, as long as I feel I am doing it, I am still tied. As soon as I know that I'm only an instrument, and whatever is being done is really being done by God, not by me, I become free. So right now we are almost like, it's like this. If you use a laptop or a computer or a tablet, you know when you are using your computer, you know that you are the one who is doing things. You do not know what's going on in that computer's head, if it has one. But what if the computer is thinking in its own head, well, I am the one who is doing it. You write a beautiful essay, and the computer says, what a great essay I wrote. Now, you know that's not true, but the computer thinks so. But as soon as the computer then knows, well, there is someone else who is operating me, I'm not doing anything, then the computer is free. Because if then a virus enters into it, it's not the computer's problem. It's the one who owns it. That's the problem. Right now,
whatever hardships and difficulties we experience, it's become our problem because we have forgotten that someone else is operating us. And one of the songs that Ramakrishna used to sing, and he used to say, addressing the Divine Mother, "You are the operator and I am the machine." And so that's the idea, that all the activity that we do through our body and mind, the body and mind within us are our instruments. It's the spirit that's operating it. And the more we identify with the spirit, the more we see everything else as an instrument, the easier it will be for us then to detach ourselves from it. And which is that acts of detachment that then we are able to uproot this tree totally. And then the tree will not have a future, but every one of us, the bird, that which was a little bird, will then discover, I am this infinite being. And I would have gone beyond past, present, and future. I've gone beyond even the sense of time. Then I become truly myself again. So there is a lot to reflect over this tree imagery that comes. So I would encourage you, again, we have not covered even a small portion of what the immensity of these verses in the Gita and the Upanishad. But whenever you get a chance or an opportunity or an interest, I would encourage you to reflect deeply over who we are, what our relationship is to this world, and what are we really doing here, and where we need to go. And in order to understand this, the tree imagery is one powerful imagery for us to help organize our thoughts on these important subjects. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Next Sunday, for the Satsang, we'll have a guest speaker, Swami Kripamayananda ji, who is the head of our Vedanta Society in Toronto. He will be here with us, and he will speak on how to live Vedanta, or how to fly out of the tree, if you like. This week on Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita, 7:30. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual. Let's conclude with a prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.